Hello, and thank you for listening to the Fishing with Dom podcast. This is your friend Dom, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a brief little lecture, brief little tidbit of history on how I personally started fishing and who I am, what I do, and just make this a me show. If you want to learn about me, keep on listening. If you don't, dial out right now because this is the Fishing with Dom podcast. Well, if you've followed me at all over the past, oh goodness, or known me personally, I got a lot of personal friends who listen to this podcast and see all my YouTube videos. Over the past 10 years, if you've known me, I've been very oriented around sports and fishing and food. I'm a larger man. I'd like to joke with people, but I've always been really into basketball, really been into football, but been really big into fishing. And you might be asking yourself, why the heck is he talking about sports right now? It all comes into play when I put the story together. When I was younger, plain and simple, I was trying very hard to find something that I was good at. I loved basketball, but I wasn't that good at basketball. I shoot the ball, I couldn't pass that well, wasn't really fast. I was on the team, I didn't play a whole lot, but I wasn't that good at basketball. I loved football. I was decent at football, but I really couldn't go anywhere with it. I'd play a little bit here and there for the school's varsity team, but that was it. I was looking for the one thing I was meant to do in my life without even me knowing it. It was a fall day in 2007. We had this little aluminum duck boat. It had this super crappy camouflage paint job to it. And I liked that boat. It could go really fast. It was really shallow. I kind of wish I still had it. I could creep into some real tight water with it. But that's aside the point. I remember my dad taking me out when I was a kid. And, before that, I'd go down to the dock, catch a couple of bluegills, with a piece of worm or dough under a bobber, and, think I was an okay fisherman. But this one day was a little different. I was fishing with my dad, and he was never much of a fisherman. We were just out there trying to spend time with one another. And I sat in the front of this little aluminum duck boat, and he was in the back because he was a lot stronger than me, and he could pull start the engine without a problem. And I ended up there's nothing wrong with push button reels, but here's how much of novice fishermen we were. Like, we were both I was a teenager and he was an adult using a push button Zebco reel. And I ended up tangling mine up, and my dad, he was kind of frustrated, and he demanded that I handed it over so he could fix it. He's kind of being snippy, and I'm not feeling the best. I wasn't emotionally as a child. I think I was a little underdeveloped. I'll be honest. I cried a lot when I was a kid, because I was very frustrated because I didn't understand a lot of things, because I didn't understand how things worked or what was I supposed to do and why I wasn't necessarily good at a lot of things. But I remember my dad kind of yelling at me, and I was feeling really down about it. And I had this... I wish I could see the presentation that was on the end of his line. From what I remember, it was probably a 7-inch Zoom ribbon tail bass fishing worm. It was just Texas rigged. And I just remember kind of casting it out. We were off of, we lived on the peninsula. We were off of the main point of the peninsula on our boat. I cast it out there, kind of wanting to go in because my dad was mad at me. And I bring it in, and I see the worm at the bottom of the water, and kind of pick it up, kind of put it back down, and the water was stained. It wasn't dirty, it wasn't really clear, but I could still kind of see my worm at the bottom. And then I remember looking down, and then my worm wasn't there anymore. And I picked up on the rod, and I felt the weight of this largemouth bass, and it was probably 3 pounds or so. But the rush of setting the hook and telling my dad, hey, I think I got a fish. I think I got a fish. And he's like, oh, no, you don't. And then it's this problem. It's about a 17-inch bass. I was so proud. And it's probably one of my most defining moments not only as an angler, but also as a person, to be able to remember, seeing the weight drop down on the slack line, and the worm kicked its tail up a little bit, and then it was just missing. And I set the hook and brought this bass into the boat with this little 5.5 foot long closed face spinning reel. Probably just had some old discount tackle shop line on it that probably came with it. And I remember catching this bass, and my dad seemed really proud of me. And I was really proud because I'd always wanted to catch a big fish. And well, I picked it up, I lifted it, and I took the hook out and released it. And, there were these people driving by on the pontoon boat, and they were clapping, and they're like, hey, kid, that's a nice fish. And I'm like, oh, thanks. This is my first largemouth bass I ever caught. And I remember putting it back, and later that night, I was thinking to myself, like, wow, that was the coolest feeling of my life. Granted, I was, if that was 2007, I was 12 or 13 at the time. I caught this nice bass. That was the coolest feeling in the world. I hope I can do that again. Well, winter came and winter left. Tried doing my thing with basketball over the summer. Wasn't that good at it. Until springtime came along, I figured, hey, I caught a couple of bass. Well, I caught that one bass. That was the only bass I had under my belt at the time. I caught a bass last year. I'm going to go see if I can go catch some more fish. So, for Christmas, I got a little bit of a tackle box, a little bit of a fishing pole. It was a $20 Shakespeare Axiom casting rod, and I had a Rhino closed-face reel. Rhino was made by Zebco. I don't know if they still make fishing products, but they were pretty tough for what they were. And I remember I had some line on there, probably just some basic trilene. And, I kept it simple because I was a kid. I really didn't know how to fish. I kept it simple. I had this Mr. Twister grub. The tail was purple, the body was green, and it was a 1/4 ounce orange jig head. My neighbor, while we lived on the peninsula, we didn't live on the water. My neighbors across the street lived on the water, and they said whenever I wanted to, and I still do, years later, I can go into their backyard and fish off of their docks. And I remember going down there, and I casted towards the left of the dock, casted around. Oh, I caught myself a bass. Another one. Like, this is so cool. I just caught a bass. And I remember somebody else was down there, and I was holding it, and I asked them if they could show me how to unhook it. And they did. And it was probably another 16-inch bass. And, I released it. It swam away. And I cast it out again. And that cast, immediately after I released that fish, I caught another 16, 17-inch bass. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, I got another one. On my second cast, my second cast, back to back, this is, like, I thought catching one bass was cool enough, back in September, but I just caught 2 back to back. Like, that's a good day of fishing in my book if you can catch 2 back to back. And, I'm 13 at the time. Like, I didn't do a lot of fishing reading. I didn't know a lot of guys in the industry. I didn't know any professionals, obviously. But I just remember thinking, wow, I caught those bass. That was really cool. Maybe this is something I'm good at. just maybe, you know, maybe fishing is my thing. Maybe I'm good at it. And, with time, came odd jobs and chores around the house, got a little allowance, started buying more tackle, started buying fishing DVDs. I remember having Joe Bucher's Muskie DVD with the original slot master spinnerbait. And I remember the Linder Rapala how-to video with Mark Martin was on it. I think it's kind of funny how I used to watch that DVD over and over again, and now Mark Martin is a personal friend of mine. It just blows my wig when I think about it. But I started growing more and more with my tackle selection, and I'd fish, a couple of days a week in the summertime, whenever I can, when the weather was nice. And so, the next year comes. It is the first weekend of summer. I was going into the 8th grade. So it was a couple of weeks after I caught those bass back to back. I'm at this graduation party, and I meet one of my mom's friends' boyfriends, and he was this cool biker style of dude, like punk rock metal guy. He didn't have crazy hair or anything, but he had the lip piercing, the tattoos. He was just a cool guy. Well, so I thought. He still is a cool guy. Doug, if you're listening to this, I love you. But we caught some fish together. And I remember him saying, "Hey, man, you fish?" I'm like, "Yeah, I fish." "Well, let's go fishing tomorrow." And so we went out the next day. We went to a little harbor town called Lexington. It's about 15 minutes north of Port Huron, if any of my listeners know where that is. And, we went out there, and we were targeting predator fish like pike or muskie or a smallmouth bass or something. And the weather was kind of slow. I had my same Shakespeare Axiom rod, the Rhino reel, and I put some green 20-pound test trilene Stren monofilament on there, because if I wanted to catch a big muskie, I wasn't going to let it get away. I was going to catch it with 20-pound monofilament. That's how young I was. I didn't know any better. Just big old thick mono. Stuff kind of looked like a spring hanging off the end of my rod. It had so much memory. And I had this little cotton cordell wally diver. It was bright orange. I remember throwing it up against this dock, and I'm reeling it back to me. And then one thing I noticed, it's gone. Like I'm watching it swim through the water, and then boom, disappears. And then I set the hook, and I see the side glaze of this fish. It ended up being a 40-inch muskie. I never got a picture with it because I was too excited to ask somebody. And this was, mind you, this was 2008. Not everybody had a cell phone. Not everybody had a camera in their pocket. So I figured, oh wow, I'm just gonna look at this and put it back, and I'll remember it forever. And I honestly will remember it forever. It was so cool to see that little lure disappear. And then for the rest of the day, I was catching rock bass and some smallmouth here and there. I had a great time. And just from then on, I started fishing more and more and more. It was getting ridiculous how I would talk to kids at school who would fish, and I'm like, "Oh, what do you fish for?" And they say, "Oh, anything that bites." And I'm like, "Oh," and I try to talk to them about fishing, and they weren't on the same level as me, and probably similar to how I wasn't on the same level as other kids in my school as far as athletics. The kids who were good at basketball weren't that good at fishing, but I was good at fishing. That's what mattered to me the most about this entire story. I was good, I was confident, and I was always willing to learn a thing or two about the sport, whether it be ethics, whether it be conservation. Fishing right now it's my entire life. I've made a small career out of it, and I'm only 22 years old right now. I'm going to be 23 in about 2 weeks, but still, I've come a long way over the past 10 years, 10, 11 years. And that's what keeps me going. I'm very excited to see what the future has in store for me. But I just started fishing more and more and more, to the point where it's all I wanted to do and all I wanted to think about. And, I'd start, you know, I'd go out fishing when I was in middle school. And if I caught one bass in one day, hey, that's a good day. You caught something. But, nowadays I can go out, I can catch several fish no problem, because I've studied the craft. I know how fish are. I've spent many years studying and learning how to fish. It's mind-boggling. It's absolutely mind-boggling. I could go on for days talking about this. And, I started watching Bassmaster Elite Series and FLW events on television whenever they were on. And I'd see young guys like a young Mike Iaconelli uh, uh, and Boyd Duckett. I'd see them win the classics, and watch them catch fish and show me how to use different lures. And I remember, I forgot who it was. I think it was might have been. I think it was I'm not 100% sure what angler it was. It might have been a Japanese angler on the Bassmaster Elite Series. He's throwing a lipless crankbait. I'm thinking to myself, hey, I could throw one of those. Those look pretty easy to fish with. That's what I'm gonna try. So I went out. I bought the Rattling Rapala because you can cast it really far. It was very affordable, and it still relatively is, about $5. And I caught some fish. That's what I did. I started reading different reviews, started getting subscriptions to North American Fisherman, started reading in Fisherman. Whenever my mom would take me grocery shopping, I'd go over to the magazine section, see if I can read an article really quick. Or, if I could sweet talk my dad into, getting me a magazine. Or if I saw a free outdoor flyer or a free outdoor magazine at the package store, I'd grab one. Just because I was so open and willing to learn different ways of catching fish. Like, I I started bass fishing. Then, before I knew it, I met people at my school who fished, and they took me out fishing for walleye, and I started catching walleye and started studying walleye. And then the same guy who took me fishing in Lexington, he said, hey, I'll take you salmon fishing when they're in the rivers. One of the most life-changing experiences of my life, and I will openly say that. It was absolutely incredible. And then he's like, hey, how about steelhead fishing? And I really fell in love with steelhead fishing. I'll tell you what, that's something I had no idea what I was getting myself into that time. That was a game changer. Because now it's one of my most favorite fish to target. It's not my most sought after because we don't have too many in my part of Michigan, but I absolutely love it. It's just been such an incredible ride. And throughout high school, kids, they wouldn't tease me, but jokingly they'd be like, "Wow, you know a lot about fishing, don't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, because that's all I really had and all I really ever wanted to do. Like, if my teacher fished, hey, he might give me a better grade because I'm a fisherman too. I'll just sweet talk him about a few things, tell a few stories here, tell a few stories there. We'd hit it off, It was some good old times, fishing. It's just all these memories are coming back to me, and I haven't thought about so many of these in years. For probably 30 years, my algebra teacher in high school held the state record for Michigan's largest bluegill. I thought that was really, really cool. I just remember how big he was describing it to me. And I, started meeting more people who fished and meeting other passionate outdoorsmen when I was in high school. And, I met one of my good friends, David Nettle. He's in the Navy right now. And it's killing him. He doesn't get to fish as much as I do. But we went to the Outdoorama show, and We saw a lot of cool things, met a lot of cool people, sat in a lot of seminars for professional fishermen, and we're asking them all sorts of questions, anything and everything. We would pre-write questions to ask them, and then when we were at the seminar, I'd write down every single little thing they said, and I still, to this day, 6 years later, I still have the notes that Mark Martin shared with me about tip-up fishing for walleyes. It was absolutely incredible. It's been an awesome ride. And now, here I am. I'm a college student now. Going to apply to grad school in about a year to be a doctor of psychology. And I'm more or less considered a professional fisherman because I am a writer who writes about fishing, and I have to go out and fish, take photos, and I end up getting paid for it. And that's kind of something I really haven't grown accustomed to yet, when I have to fill out on my taxes that I'm a professional fisherman slash writer. And I say professional fisherman very, very loosely because a lot of people really don't know what that means. Heck, I just found out what that meant a few months ago. I fish, and I write about it. So, more or less, call it as you see it. I don't think so, but I kind of am. Some people say I am. I guess so. Whatever it may be, I enjoy what I do. I'm not a touring professional. You know, I might get into tournaments in the future when I have a lot more money. But as it is, this whole fishing ride has been nothing but an absolute awesome roller coaster. Just, having, mediocre stuff to, rods I found in garbage cans to, $15 combos to, $100 rods, $150 reels to, even to the point of where, oh, hey, you work within the industry, you can get certain items at cost, or hey, we recognize that you're fishing with Dom, us, the real company, whatever real company it may be I want, they'll say, hey, we'll cut you a deal on this kind of stuff because you're working in the industry. You don't need to pay full price on it. And I'm like, wow, that means a lot to me that I've come this far in the past 7 or 10 years. That a lot of people will never make it this far, and it's incredibly mind-boggling. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was not weeks ago, months ago, I was working the Bassmaster Elite Series. And, I got in my car afterwards. I've met just about every professional angler there is in North America. But it kind of hit me after I was halfway home, and I told myself, I just got backstage passes and hung out with some of the best bass fishermen in the world. That's pretty darn cool when you think about it. I I'm competitive. I can fish with these guys. I'd like to think I could keep up with some of them at least. You got your obvious legends like Skeet Reese and Kevin Van Dam. Those guys are just animals. They're always catching fish. But I've got a couple of friends in the Elite Series that I'll jab at their size and say, "Hey, why don't you just give me the boat?" Oh, goodness gracious! I wouldn't trade anything for what I do because I enjoy what I do. It's in some days I feel like it is all I have. Just plain and simple. I catch fish, I take photographs, I write about it, I have fun. I'm active with everybody on social media, whether it be, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whether it be at seminars, meeting people recognizing me for my work, saying, "Hey, don't you write for this newspaper? Don't you write for this magazine?" Like, yeah, that's me. And then they want an autograph, and that still trips me up whenever that happens. It doesn't happen too often, but when it does, it's pretty humbling to think that people recognize and respect you that much. It's hard to swallow a lot of days, I'm not going to lie. I sleep in my parents' basement because I'm a college student. And to my left, I have my little studio area where I record these podcasts, where I film my YouTube videos, where I store my tackle boxes, where I have all my rods supplied. And then to my right, I have my dresser where I keep all my clothes. It's all I need. I've got my fishing stuff, my clothes, food's upstairs. I'm going to live. I think I'm going to be just fine. And I never thought I'd make it this far. I've met an astonishingly huge amount of incredible people when it comes to fishing. My best friend Andy and I, we met up because he saw me on Facebook and he said, "Hey, you catch a lot of fish. Let's go fishing together." And I thought this kid was just some derpy high schooler, and we hit it off, and he became one of my best friends. And then I met a lot of other people. We'd fish together, but some fishing buddies are for life, some of them aren't. That's all I'll say about that. Uh, I met a couple of guys at school. I took one of them fishing. Every single time I take this kid out fishing, we just hammer fish. We've caught a lot of fish, and I've been to a lot of different cool fishing locations all across the country. I've been to Peachtree Lake in Georgia. I've fished Lake Okeechobee. I fished the ocean. I fished and caught gar on Disney World property. That's pretty darn cool in my opinion. And then I fished most of the Great Lakes. Well, Erie, Huron, and Michigan. I've never seen Lake Superior or Lake Ontario yet. I fished the Detroit River, Lake St. Clair, the Saginaw River. So many different spots around the region. It's mind-boggling. I've met a lot of great people fishing. I've gotten a lot of people fishing too. I've gotten people into the right path of fishing. For instance, I've gotten some people into circle hooks who are big catfish fishermen. I've gotten some people into wacky rigging. I've gotten some people into lipless crankbaits or fishing with jigs, for instance. Fishing, it's what people don't tell you about fishing. The more you get into it, the more deeper and the more you realize how much of a community it is, where we all almost rely on one another to share, hey, you should try this, or you shouldn't try this, or I had good luck here, but you should probably try this next time you head out, if it's, these conditions out there. I never expected that, and I don't honestly think that's a thing most people take into consideration. I I can't begin to really describe what that's like. Just I'd have to sit down for a while and think about every place I have ever fished in my life. There's been so many. It's incredible to think about, and I never thought I'd go to all those cool places or meet all these people or do all this stuff. Oh wow, I'm just babbling on and on right now, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, like yeah, that's right. I fished so and so in the winter of this year with this guy, or we caught Atlantic salmon at Port Sanilac during my cousin's graduation party, and yeah, I'm just thinking about all these places. This is mind blowing. Wow, I fished with a lot of great people. I've got a lot of people into fishing. I fished with some fantastic lures. I've learned what works. I've learned what doesn't work. I've learned how to fish, how to plan a fishing trip, how to load a car, and how to take a new friend fishing too. That was something that I wasn't expecting either. One of my good friends, Chris Blackmer. We'd talk a little bit in high school, but then after graduation, everybody goes their separate ways. But he came into the store I worked at, and he's like, "Hey, how's it going?" I'm like, "Hey, what's up?" And we kind of talked about fishing a little bit. And, lo and behold, the next day, we were fishing together. And I was showing him what to do. And we were just pounding channel catfish under a dam over towards the city of Flint. Just one after another. And then we'd go back, we'd catch more. And we became friends out of it. And, whenever we got the chance to go out and fish together, we did. I call him Catfish Chris because, that's essentially what we do most of the time because, there's not much challenge to it, but you got to know when to play around with it, when to let it be. But we've caught a lot of catfish together. We became great friends out of fishing, and I never expected that. Uh, I've been out of high school almost 5 years now, and people, they'll see me at the gas station. They'll message me on Facebook. And Facebook's a whole other world. Like, people I've never met in my life will message me on Facebook and say, "Hey, I see you've been catching some fish out there," or "I read your article, I really liked it," or "What do you think about this?" It's incredible. I've been on such a ride over the past 10 years, and I think it's just the beginning, because I'm almost 23. Correct me if I sound cocky or if I sound like I've got too much going on right now, but if I'm only 23 and I've done this much so far, with all these, with a couple of companies, with some professional anglers, with other writers, with guides, with organizations, I don't know, what else could I be doing? My good friend David Rose asked me, "Do you want to be a professional fisherman, or do you want to be a professional fishing writer?" And I told him I'd like to be a writer, because there's a lot of professional fishermen out there. It's a very, very hard market, not only to get into, but stay alive in. Figuratively, like, everybody lives, nobody dies in professional fishing. Uh, it's just hard to stay in the business of it. But I want to be that guy who is in Fisherman Magazine all the time, or in North American Fisherman. I want to be a face that is recognized by many outdoorsmen. That's who I am. That's what I want to be. And I'll go to Ultimate Fishing Show Detroit or Outdoorama at the Suburban Showplace in Novi, and they'll say, "Hey, I'm looking. Are you Dom?" Because they'll see me hanging out at one of the booths. I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." They're like, "Oh, I follow your account," or, "Oh, I read your stuff. I think what you're doing is awesome, dude. You're young. I wish I was a writer." I'm thinking to myself, this is awesome. Like, you recognize my work, and it all started when I casted out that that crappy Texas rigged ribbon tail zoom worm. I can't believe it. I can't believe I've made it this far. I can't believe I catch fish like I do nowadays. Like, if I could go back 10 years and tell little Dominic something, I'd say, "Hang on, because you're going for a ride. You're going to catch more fish than you ever thought. You're going to catch bigger fish than you could ever imagine. And you're going to fish with some of the best people in the industry on some of the finest boats on the market. And you're going to make great friends. You're going to catch a lot of fish. You're going to be successful, and you're going to be different." That's one thing. You're going to be different. You're not just going to go out there and throw a worm and settle for being an average fisherman. No, you're going to study this. You're going to think about it philosophically. You're going to be the best fisherman that you can be. And that's what I'm trying to do. Plain and simple. That is what I'm trying to do. Like, there's a lot of good fishermen out there. I think I'm a good fisherman. And I really do think I'm a good fisherman. I go out, I caught fish, catch fish. Today I went out, caught a couple fish. No big deal. But I'm already thinking months ahead in the game, what days I'm going to go, what I'm going to use, what line I'm going to engage. If I go to this spot, am I going to bring this rod with me? Or how many rod holders am I going to need to bring when I go fish the Tittabawassee River? Or when am I going to need to send this reel to Okuma to have them fix? There's so much to it. I'm constantly thinking about fishing. And people are like, "Is that all you care about?" And I tell them, some days, yeah. Some days it's the absolute only thing I care about. Granted, I do care about school a lot. It's going to be my main squeeze, it's very, very hard, almost impossible to get rich in the fishing industry. That's why I'm going to school. I'm going to be a doctor of psychology. I'm going to be applying to PhD programs in about a year. That should be fun. But hey, in the meantime, take it easy in my undergrad, catch a few fish here and there. It's going to be a great time. Oh man, what else do I say? I never thought, when I was a kid, these little creeks and rivers I would drive across, to go to the grocery store, going up north to summer camp or, going to a friend's house. These little creeks, these small lakes, these rivers, I never thought I'd catch fish out of them like I do now. Just because I think, oh, that's kind of small. I don't know if there'd be any big fish living in there. And, when you think about it as much as I do and you take everything into consideration, you ask yourself, why not? Why the hell not? Last year I went out to a river I drove by my entire life. Fished it, studied it, fished it some more, ended up cracking the code and finding out how to fish and catch big smallmouth in this river that's only as wide as a 2-lane road. And that's what's really, really magical to this. So many fishermen, so many people will drive by this spot and say, oh, it doesn't look that deep. There can't be, 4-pound smallmouth, within 100 yards of here. Well, there are. You got to know what to look for. You got to know how to cast. You got to know what to use. You got to know how to land a fish in current in some situations. The more you fish, the more well-rounded, the more sharp you're going to be. Just like a knife. The more you use it, well, that's actually a bad analogy, but it's just like a tool. The more you use it, the more familiar you are with it. That's a better analogy than the knife. That's a lot better analogy than the knife. I just love fishing so much. And I've only been fishing, roughly 10 years. The advancements that have come out since I started with different brake systems, improvements to fluorocarbon, better braids, monofilaments that tie and cast better, lures that look like bats and ducks. It's crazy. When I was a kid, we Texas rigged. We'd throw a hula popper every now and then, and now I'm, flipping heavy cover with a 65-pound superline with an ounce of tungsten. I'm punching mats and cranking out, the trigger happy largemouth, or I'm tossing the whopper plopper around, or skimming some new lure with one of Abu Garcia's newest bait casters out there. It's pretty astonishing, When this is what we used to fish with, this is what we used to do, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, I haven't done that in years for a reason, just because I have such a wide arsenal of tackle to use nowadays. I went from not being able to afford certain baits to making my own certain baits, and then finding out what makes a plastic worm better than other plastic worms. I like the Gary Yamamoto worms. They're really soft, but they're too soft for me. So, you find out what works and what works better. You become a more efficient working machine the more you fish. You'll identify, what's good, what's not as good, what could be better, how could you make this better, what do the fish want that you might not be doing exactly the right way. That's a very good point. That's a very great thing to take into consideration. And especially when it comes to steelhead. I never thought it could be as complex as steelhead. Say 8 o'clock they'll hit orange pretty well, but then noon rolls around. Nope, they only want green and chrome. I never thought I'd see it like this. But then again, I'm young. I might think I know a lot and I don't know anything. It could be. I guess that'll all come with time. I've been on an incredible ride, to say the least. I've fished with some of the best. I've met a lot of great people. I've been recognized by a ton of greats in the industry. And it all started when I realized, hey, I'm good at fishing. I'm not good at a lot of other things. I'm not good at a lot of things. I'm not good at anything at all but fishing. I could talk to you about fishing all day. I could share my ideas, tell you what you need to try, maybe something you could be doing wrong. I don't want to come off as too strong. But I could talk to you about fishing all day up and down the street. I'll talk to you about fishing so much You'll probably hate me in 20 minutes because you'd think to yourself, God damn, does all this kid talk about is fishing? It's all I do. I work with my school's basketball team, and they ask me, hey, how are you so into fishing? And I ask them, hey, how are you so into basketball? How are you, statistically speaking, in the top 1% of all basketball players in the country? That's the statistic for Division I basketball players. But I ask them, what separates you from 99% of other high school varsity basketball players? Because you study the game, you love it, it's all you know. Like, you've dedicated your life and your mind and understanding philosophically to basketball. And I've decided to do that with fishing. It's everywhere and anywhere. When the weather goes up, I think, if this algae is blooming, there should be bait fish up in this area and bass could be around. Or if the river gets flooded, I'm thinking to myself, those catfish might be just up a little bit higher because those bluegills or shad could be hanging out underneath the tree roots. It's so interesting, where I've been, what I've done, and I have to remind myself that this is a podcast all about me. Just because I feel like I've been talking about myself for a while now. Caught a lot of fish. But what can I say? I'm excited for the future. I've had a great past. I fished with some incredible people. But if I had to pick 3 of my best fishing trips, they would be... One would be last year with my buddy Andy, or buddy Chris. We caught a lot of big channel catfish, over 10 pounds by his house on the Tittabawassee River. In 2013, my good friend Andy and I, we also caught... we weren't catching catfish. We were catching a lot of big salmon in 2013. We had a fantastic run on the Big Manistee River, and I put a lot of work into that trip. I was watching the water levels and the temperatures, and I was pretty much patterning when and where we should go, and we caught a lot of fish that day. It was an absolute riot. We caught, oh my goodness, I don't think all of our fish we kept were over 20 pounds, and I don't think we caught a fish under 10. It was absolutely incredible. It was just one after another. And then probably the other greatest fishing trip of my life, I've got a lot of honorable mentions. Me and Mark Martin, we were on Lake Erie with another fellow outdoor writer, Roger Buchema. If you ever read his stuff in Woods and Water News, great writer, great guy. I love you, Roger, if you're listening to this. We went out on Lake Erie, out of Port Clinton, Ohio, and we were trolling deep down husky jerks, some bandit walleye trollers, some tail dancers, and we were catching the biggest walleye of my life. My biggest I caught that day was 10.5 pounds. We didn't catch a fish under 8 pounds that day. We were just out there trolling and reeling in these whales of walleye with a guy I've looked up to for so many years and read about and watched on TV, and now I'm an adult, and we fish with each other once or twice a year, and we text each other every so often. It's so eye-opening, not only in the realm of fishing, but how life can be. Your idols are people too, and someday, I might be somebody's idol when it comes to fishing. You just gotta, be humble and remind yourself, you put your pants on one leg at a time unless you're a freak. Oh goodness. Oh wow. Trying to think if there's anything else to my story. You know, I wasn't good at a whole lot of things. I won't get into personal details, but when I was down in the dumps for a while after I graduated high school and life wasn't working out for me, I just started. I fished a lot more because I didn't have to go to school. I studied fish. I'd go different places. I would take a lot of things into consideration, and I became a much better fisherman out of it. I learned a lot more about myself when I was fishing than I learned about fish. And that's a big life lesson that I came across. And I've been fishing so much. I've caught so many big fish, and I've lost a lot of fish too. And I'll tell you this before I wrap this up: you'll learn more from the fish you don't catch than the fish you do catch. And that's something I've kept really close and really near and dear to my heart for the past 8 years. When I was a kid, I missed that bass. Oh man, I'm gonna think about that all day. Dang it, that sucks. Now I'm an adult and I say, oh man, well hey, at least next time I'm gonna try to do something different. I'm gonna make this a learning point. I'm gonna try not to do that. And you know, here I am. A couple of years later, I hook into a fish. I land a lot more fish than I lose. A substantial amount, actually. It's astonishing. Wow. And I think about it, that I've learned so much, not only about the sport, but about myself. And I've furthered myself just by being curious. Absolutely incredible. It goes to show you can be anything you want to be, but you have to be willing to put in the man hours and be uncommon. See, what got me recognized by a lot of anglers and people in the industry, I wasn't your average weekend fisherman, or I wasn't just, hopping around the back lakes, keeping to myself. I was talking to people about it. I was really active in the industry and the community. That's the thing about it. That's what I really, really liked about fishing, was talking to people about it, getting their ideas, seeing what they had to say about it. And every so often, you strike a gold mine. You meet a friend who feeds off of your positive energy, and then you get a little bit of their opinion. And it doesn't matter what their level is. I've gotten incredible advice from people who've only been fishing half as long as I have, just because they see it from a different viewpoint. I can't believe it. I absolutely can't believe it some days. Oh, well. Well, folks, I've been rambling on for about almost 48 minutes now. Thank you for listening. I really do appreciate it. I'm trying to see if there's anything else that I've been leaving out of this podcast. Oh, goodness gracious. I just started fishing. I started doing things differently. And I'm happy I did. I'm happy I did. Well, thank you for listening to the Fishing with Dom podcast. As always, if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, leave them below in the comments section below. I'd really like to hear what you have to say. Maybe we can both teach each other a thing or two. I'm on all realms of social media, such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, at Fishing with Dom. Holler at me if you have any questions. Let me hear it. I'd love to work out problems with you when it comes to fishing. Give me subscribe if you'd like. But until next time, I appreciate you, the listener, for listening through this entire rant. If you've made it this far, awesome. Good for you. I owe you something. Don't know what it is. Rain check for a later time. But this has been real. Thank you for having me. Keep on listening. Thank you. Bye-bye.